Boyles for, once again, The Shoot here on 710 KNUS in the Mark Crowley studios. And this is a show that we had put together, and because I caught COVID, we had to drop it. And it is absolutely wonderful to have this man here. I love him to death. We've been friends forever. I think when the Cultural Center opened.
A long time.
Long time. Brother Jeff has been kind enough to come in and do The Shoot. And as someone said, who's sitting in the studio, said, well, Peter said you were handsome.
There he is.
There he is.
Peter, you actually knew my mother, rest in peace. You knew my mom before he knew me.
Absolutely.
My mom was a big Peter Boyles fan, and then that's how we all got together.
I was trying to remember, because last night I'm trying to lace it together. When did we meet, and how did that go together? I knew your mom well.
Yeah.
And I think, was it the black market?
No, before then. We actually met personally when I was doing a speaking engagement, and I brought in Lenora Falani. Remember, she was running for president?
Yes.
And we brought her to the Peter Boyles show, and you and Lenora Falani were going back and forth and, getting into all the politics. But that's when we met personally.
Man, what year was that?
1,000 years ago.
Had to be. The legend, as I said, moves on from the Chippewa on down. This man has always been a friend, and in a business that oftentimes friendships come and go for political reasons, or for somebody said something to somebody who said something to somebody. He's always been a stalwart. I could never pick up the phone and say, Jeff, and he wouldn't be there. And in this business, those of you who know a little bit about this business, that means a lot. And
well, I could tell you, Pete, what was one of those calls, if you recall. Remember the young lady? It was Mother's Day. She was on the bus, and the car hit her. She got off the bus. She's got the baby carriers or whatever. A drunk driver or somebody hit her.
It was
Colorado Boulevard and killed the baby on Mother's Day.
Yep, I do.
And you called and said, Brother Jeff, let's do something.
Yeah, we did.
And raised tons of money.
Yeah, we did. We sat outside of Old K-How, and no, for real.
Firemen had the boots out and everything.
Everybody came on that one, and she was the little girl was, I think she was the littlest kid, but she was walking. I think there was a newborn. She was, and this drunk woman hit. And then they couldn't find the driver. And then eventually, no. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we always pulled off. Talk about growing up. I mean, one of the things that was said last night, and so we're doing this after the election returns, and I'm flipping channels watch it come in, and we'll get Jeffrey's thoughts. But there was an African American man, and he was a columnist, and I didn't get his name. I came into the end of it. But he said the most important thing, I think, that was said last night. He said that in Georgia, he said that this runoff is taking place between two African American men. He said, that's hardly the Georgia of my youth. Now, we can talk about both of these guys and who they are, but the fact that I thought, well, I'm going to talk to Jeff. I'm going to ask that tomorrow. How powerful is that?
Man, it's really powerful, but I think it's an interesting play on the Republican Party, or the movers and shakers inside that party's behalf, because they're playing off of President Obama. And so if you look at, like, in music and boxing or whatever, there are these trends. And so Obama becomes this trend, like, this is what the politician looks like, and a part of that trend is the black guy. And he's galvanizing all of this support, you know what I mean, for the other side. Now, I see the Republican Party, if you look at a lot of these candidates, they're black men.
Yeah.
But when you look into the party, they don't reflect what the party looks like. I think that Obama really reflected perhaps what the Democratic Party looks like. However, when you look at Herschel Walker, he doesn't really reflect the demographic of the Republican Party. And then he's also off the terms of the character of the party and everything that the party says that they stand for. He's the total opposite. One of the things that I heard was really powerful was someone said that Herschel Walker represents many of the stereotypical or like aspects of blackness. Like, you know, folks want to see like the negative stereotypes. He embodies that for a lot of individuals, but for whatever reason, I don't know why this race is so close, why it's so palatable, but it really goes to the fact that the party picked their horse and they had to run with it.
Well, I think it's true with Fetterman wins, Oz loses. The big loser last night's Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump just burned the bridges last night. But when Fetterman and then Oz, and Oz is a fraud. I mean, I'm sorry, he is a fraud. And what happened and how Herschel Walker gets the nod, it's Donald Trump.
He comes. That's really looking at what the Donald Trump brand means to the party, because I think that Donald Trump got a lot of individuals through the primary.
Yes, he did.
And so the party had to go with that particular, those picks, but it didn't play out through those general elections.
These people in the party after last night, I think not so much, but the rank and file Republicans, whether they're candidates or radio talk show hosts, whoever they are, they lived in fear of Donald Trump, or they lived in fear of what Donald Trump would do with his chosen talk show host or his, fill in the blank minions, his operatives. And, they belled the cat. Remember they'll bell, who's going to bell the cat? They belled the cat last night.
Well, Donald Trump, he seems to me like he presents as like a populist, and you have a lot of these populist candidates that they attract the masses based on outlandish whatever it is, and then it's hard to deliver, because once you get inside, there's a lot of disappointment. I believe Donald Trump delivered on a lot. However, a part of his base is so far to the opposite side, it's hard for them to run to the center. You've got to get the center if you're gonna win elections.
Why didn't they vet these guys? I mean, Oz was easily vettable, and they didn't vet him. I've seen some stuff here locally that they put a guy up to run. I said, then all of a sudden, everybody's dirty underwear starts flying out the back window, and you're going, why didn't you ask about that? And we were talking about Heidi Ganahl. The first time Heidi Ganahl did our radio show, I asked her, I said, did Donald Trump win? She choked. She couldn't answer. Not because she didn't know the truth, and I don't know if she knows it or not. She was afraid, and of course it happened, of retribution. And that's politics.
It is politics, because I had on my show Danny Moore. I never talked to Heidi, but I did talk to her running mate. And Danny, when talking with me and others, he sounded exactly like Community. However, his background was really, election denier, all of those different things.
And you didn't know that?
But he, when talking to me, he was staunch, that's not me. This was a fair election. We have the president, the numbers speak. It was a total different conversation.
The last time you and I talked, you said how many of these guys now are saying, well, I used to say that, but I don't say it anymore.
Yeah, that's it.
Because they had to.
They have to, because the majority of individuals believe that there's election integrity. But if you look at both sides, they're often you could go back to with the Democratic Party when Trump won. All of them were saying it was the election was stolen.
Hillary said it.
That was the mantra of the Democratic Party. And then when Donald Trump loses, the mantra is from that part, the election was stolen. Election integrity, et cetera, comes into play. So I think that they're playing on individuals' emotions when they know fair well that, I lost. However, I just can't come out and say that.
There's a wonderful book, and it's called Shattered, and it was about shattering the glass ceiling. And they started out, I've gotten to know these people very well, and they were writing about Hillary Clinton believing that she was going to shatter the roof. And then they started going around Indiana, Wisconsin, talking to working men and women. They're going, no, we're not going to do it. So it comes that night. They're in the Javits Center. According to numbers of people, the Saudi Arabians have sent her a gift, this giant TV. She's been drinking too much, a sheet cake. She fires the sheet cake through the television. It's on, and her husband's there, and she isn't going to call Trump. And the phone rings, and it's Barack Obama. And Obama says, make the call. Do the right thing.
Well, with Hillary, I don't think she showed up for the fight. I think that she just thought that, what?
Walk it in.
you have to play the game. She didn't play it. I know a lot of individuals that wanted to, get out and talk to ordinary people, labor. They were turning buses around. They weren't investing. I knew individuals that were paying for their own bumper stickers and all of that stuff. She didn't show up, so there was this level of entitlement. And then I read the book by Omarosa, and she said that Trump never believed he was going to win.
No, he
you
did
know,
not.
they didn't have a transition team.
Yeah, right.
And when they won, they were like, okay, what do we do now?
What do we do next? That's right.
You know, so this was a perfect storm. Entitlement. Hillary was not well liked.
Nope.
You know, I talked to a lot of women, and they were. I couldn't find one to say, you know, I'm really excited about her. They were all saying, yes, it's time for a woman, but she's not the one. There was a lot of that on the Hillary side. And so it was very interesting to see that she didn't show up, this level of entitlement. She'd already picked out the color of the drapes. And
she measured.
Like she did all of that.
Yeah.
And, you know, she got hit not looking.
But I always think that was the most interesting race because now reading all the different Trump books that are there, Donald Trump back in June starts to and he starts to look at really good, decent polling, and they know they're down and they're behind. This is way before that first debate, but he starts to say then, it was stolen from me. If I lose, it was stolen from me. Well, that's echoed now for 2 years, and I think chickens came home last night, and everybody said, no, that's enough.
It's a problem inside of the party, and the Republican Party, and we could look at this also here in Colorado. They're circle firing on themselves. I mean, I'm just outside listener.
Yeah.
Much of what I heard was, and I hear is Republicans, there's a segment that says, you're not a Republican, you're a rhino.
Unless, I get called it.
You know, there's like, these are rhinos, you're not a real Republican. So the argument that I'm hearing as a voter is, you know what, they don't like each other.
They destroyed each other. They destroyed O'Day. They destroyed Pam Anderson. They were death in the crib. They were stillborns. After that insanity in that Colorado Springs Assembly, where they put Tina Peters, she's going to go to the joint. I mean, they put her up, and they put these other people up, and they're going to be. These are our real candidates. Well, finally, people could control the primary, and you get O'Day, you get Pam Anderson. I mean, Tina Peters. That's insanity. But that was who they wanted. And so I've used this too many times, but historians call something the Samson effect. I'll tear this whole building down on top of myself, and I lay under the rubble and say, see?
And they're willing to do that. I mean, and that's when ego gets involved. And that's why I think a lot of ordinary voters, I'm not talking about your party stalwarts or your party
rank
people,
and file.
but just your rank and file, the undecided. They see this, and this is everything that causes a dislike of politics and politicians. It's like, you're not in it for me, you're really in it for yourself, you're in it for your ego, you know, you're looking for your next step, you're stroking everything about yourself, but at the same time, gas prices are going up. We don't know about school security. You know what I mean? I heard the conversation about mortgage rates, perhaps a recession. I mean, all of these different dynamics, and instead of addressing those dynamics, we're hearing, well, this candidate is not Republican enough.
I was listening to a radio show yesterday in Denver, and the on-air said, what is an election denier? And I wanted to pick up the phone and say, somebody that doesn't believe lies. Click. It's not that tough. You know, and who is this person? Well, that person is someone who doesn't want to believe the lie. If you want to believe the lie, then that's the litmus test. Do you believe Donald Trump was cheated? Yes or no? Yes, he was. Oh, come on in the room.
Well, the party's in disarray right now. Their best candidate was Heidi. No one knows Heidi, you know, so you don't have a bench, and you're going against someone who's perhaps a billionaire, been in Congress, has won all of these different seats, etc. And then they throw in someone who, like, no one knows. Perhaps she's exciting, perhaps she has something to say, but at the end of the day, look at what took place last night. I was at the Art Hotel where the Democratic kind of watch party was taking place. Governor Polis walked out. I don't know. It was 6 o'clock. Like I got home and put the children to sleep.
You bet. I mean, I was up and I'm fighting off the end of this thing, but I was up. Okay, well, this food and that food and that food, and all of a sudden, even the guys that work here that were doing it live, I said to the boss, Kelly Michaels, who had the remote, I said, "What time are you out of there?" He said, 7 o'clock. I mean, tearing down a remote and getting out of someplace. I asked Mark Crowd. It takes an hour to set it up, and I mean, I don't even know if their band played a song.
Not at all. But I don't think, and particularly I focus, locally, Colorado, hyper locally. I see the trend going further out. But I don't think those who are losing recognize why. They come up with an excuse of why. You know what I mean? It was him, it was her, it was that. They point the finger.
They're already
but
saying
it's like
they're saying it was stolen.
With these numbers, when do you course correct and say we need to get more in tune with where Colorado is, as opposed to saying everybody in Colorado is wrong? They're taking it except for us. Yeah. They haven't figured that out, and until they do, I don't see them winning any elections on the statewide level anytime soon.
I don't either. I think there'll be the pockets that we see, but remember they tried to knock Lamborn out of the box, and replace him with a guy who wanted to what his name Let's go Brandon. He wanted to change his name, put it on the ballot. I'm thinking, what are you people thinking? And that's exactly right. They're not.
Well, the first time, if you remember, after Polis won the first time, the excuse was, well, we didn't know he was gay. Remember, everybody was saying that. I mean, I was listening. They was like, he was gay. Knew. Had I known he was gay, I would have worked. Well, this time you knew he was gay.
Yeah.
And you got whooped even by a larger margin. So if you think that you're on the right side of these social issues or just the way of life or the way individuals thinking, you've got a lot of ground to cover, and I don't think they're ready to do it.
The golden girl of Colorado Republican Party, Lauren Boebert, she's getting spanked. And everybody's saying to me when I walked in this morning, how'd that happen? I said, well, she lives in a district that includes Aspen and Greater Aspen and all this. And so she does a television show that everybody says, she said, well, the church should be running the government. I'm thinking, excuse me? The church should be running, the government should be listening to the church. I said, that's a call to theocracy. I mean, we have to move away from that. Was King George and the Church of England. What are we doing? And she was cheered in this studio, in this building. And I'm thinking, do you understand what she just said?
Yeah. She's cheered by the loudest voices in the room.
Yeah.
However, not the majority of individuals in the room. And so what's happening is the loudest voices are getting the most attention, and the quietest those who are not as vociferous, they're showing up to the polls because they're really watching. They're like, what are these pocketbook issues? I don't care if you don't like that person or that person, and I don't want to get into how many months or that month. I just want to know, is my community going to be safe? Can I afford these eggs? What's going on with the butter? Am I going to get laid off? I'm just trying to catch up after the economy has been shut down for 2 years. And I hear you over here whining and complaining and doing all these different things. And those are the loud voices. And I don't understand if people realize the loudest voice is not always the strongest voice or even the common opinion. Just because you hear it doesn't mean that it's real.
This was a group of true believers. I mean, in the religious sense.
Yeah, that's the religion you're talking about.
That was the Orange Man was the savior, and I had people tell me that God sent us Donald Trump, and I thought. Whew.
I just heard Donald Trump say something, because I understand he's going to announce for his presidency.
We owe each other lunch anyhow. I got a present for you, but the point of it is, lunch says he won't do it.
I don't know if his ego will allow him not to do it. You know what I mean? I think he was talking about DeSantis. He said, if you get in the race, I know more about you than anybody knows. I got pictures. So now I'm like, that's exactly what folks don't want to hear. Nope. Folks want to hear, what is your policy?
Nope.
Where are you going to take this country?
Watch this.
Where am I going to feel as though my future matters? I don't care if you got the dirty pictures and that's the platform you're running on. And if it is, that it's just going to be more fuel for the fire for the other side to run this race.
I've read so many of the books, but he can't tolerate competition. So DeSantis, who really does look like a competitor right now, he comes out. He doesn't say? He comes after the guy and says, "I got dirt on you." And I'm thinking to myself, oh, that's your best shot. And I don't know. I'm sure he's sitting with the lawyers right now, because he faces criminal charges, up and down the dial. And I don't know what will happen to January 6th, because they certainly didn't take the House and change all the impeachment around. And so you got all of these things lined up, and what's going on in Florida, what's going on in Malargo, what's going on in New York. Will they say to him, because in the woman who wrote the book, come on, Peter, make your mind work, Confidence Man, And she said he has painted himself in a corner and he has to run. But last night, he was the blunt of every bad outcome was Donald Trump.
Yeah.
The stench of Trump.
But folks don't want to hear that, especially like you say, if you're a true believer. It's not that we're anti this or that. It's just look at the outcome of these elections and then course correct. But if you're going to still be in this food fight, and I don't know, I'm not a mental health provider or anything like that, but there is this thing called narcissism. And when you're like that, there's nothing that can tell you you're not the one to save this country while at the same time destroying it. And then you've got those that are the loudest in the room saying, yeah, hooray. And then you look at those numbers and you say, well, it's the most, a good portion of your base are, not college educated, they're kind of not like into the policy thing. They're hearing what you're saying. But those same individuals saw a billionaire put on a trucker's hat and appeal to them as if I'm one of you. Trump is as far away from ordinary individuals who are trying to make a living as night is from day.
Agreed.
And I think that a lot of individuals see it except the ones who can't. And they won't even look at these outcomes last night and make the connection.
Well, we're way off, and like I said, I always respect your opinion, and very well listening to other people that he must. It's self-protective because maybe that keeps the feds off him if he's running, which is one of the theories. The other one is, but what you're saying is he is immensely driven by himself. He needs no one else, and that he'll say, and there's one book entitled "Only I Can Fix It," which is one of the early books I read about Trump. But if they're smart, and they're not, they got the guy in Florida.
Well, they won't, because you're seeing what a bully can do. I've got a base, and if you want a part of this base, you've got to listen to me, and then I'm going to be a player. And here's my format. Donald Trump said I could go in the middle of Times Square and shoot somebody and still win. And now you have candidates like Herschel Walker who have the same kind of dynamics, but he can't pull off what Trump could pull off. Herschel can't go in the middle of Times Square and shoot someone, but he can say, you know what, I'm against abortion for everybody except for me. You know what I mean? I can wield a weapon.
Why didn't they vet this guy?
It was too late.
Exactly.
Because you've got a power base in Donald Trump.
Yep.
It say what you want. It does pull folks to the fire. He's got a following. He's got those individuals that say yes, and he's got those individuals say, you remember the Tea Party used to do this. They were like, you have segments of the party that say, if you don't listen to us, we will tear this down. Bernie would do that to the Democratic Party, but Bernie's not really a Democrat. You know what I mean? He's from the outside of the party trying to dictate what's inside the party. Right here, you have Trump inside the party who came from outside the party, because when I was growing up, he was like a Democrat.
Well, he's giving money to the Clintons.
He was on every rap record. He was a darling.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then all of a sudden, he was like, whoop, he was way over here, and no one can see that. I think that the party will be strong when they see someone who really represents their values, has consistency, is trustworthy, and when you sit down, you say, you know what, I would like my children to go, watch my children while we go to the movies.
I'm going to move things back another direction. One time you and I were together, and you told me a story about riding your two-wheeler as a little kid. I don't know if you remember telling me the story, and that you couldn't leave the neighborhood. Would you mind telling that story? And set the time and the year, because.
Well, there was a newscaster. We were talking, and sharing this story. And this is just the basic you fit the description story. Growing up in Park Hill, Greater Park Hill meant on the other side by Montview. Park Hill was over there, this other side, which became over there by Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard and all of those different things. I guarantee you, Pete, when I was young, if you or I, well, me personally, would ride my bike and I would get towards 23rd and get toward Montview, drip, drip, you fit the description. Yeah. It's the basic, what are you doing over here? Yeah. And so it does a couple of things. Psychologically, it tells you where is your place, where can you go? And then also it leaves you with this the feeling of, am I wrong? Like, can I go? And so the newscaster was having this conversation with me, and I said, okay, no, don't do anything. Here's what we're going to do. You just come out my office. We're going to walk down the street, and every black person you see, I just want you to ask them, have you ever heard you fit the description? She was in tears by the time we got to the end of the block. They started telling the stories. They started telling the times. And that is, in fact, the fabric of this country, even right now. There are individuals that can look around and see nobody that looks like them. They can have conversations that have no differing opinions. They can go to classrooms, even if the school is diverse, and know that their kids are in a very segregated system. The society is still segregated. And I think that there are those who want it like that because folks don't like change. And then there are others that are saying, you know what? The world is changing and people are more engaged today. My children are growing up with more difference than I grew up with. You know what I mean? Most individuals grew up. I didn't have any white friends growing up.
Yeah, because we've talked about that.
And there were none to have until we were bused. Yeah. And then at the same time, by the time you got to the classroom, the bell rang and you was right back to your community.
Sure.
And so this generation has a lot of young people, if you talk to them, they don't have the hang-ups around race like I did growing up. They don't have the hang-ups around sexual orientation and different religion and all these different things. They're more integrated, even though they might sit in separate places in the cafeteria, they still know each other. And so until these parties recognize, I know the Democrats say it, like they say it but they still live in the segregated world. You know what I mean? But they parrot it.
When was the moment, and like I said, I knew your mom, and when was the moment where you knew, when you were aware of the scenario that you were going to live in?
Well, racially, one of the scenarios was, first of all, there was a black community. Like in the metro area right now, if anybody's watching, they're like, where's the black community? It does not exist anymore because of gentrification and displacement and costs and all those different things. Not even saying blacks don't have money, because a lot of them do have a lot of money, but for some reason, all of these places become wider and wider and wider and taller and taller and taller.
And also, affluent neighborhoods aren't going to argue when a wealthy guy moves in who happens to not have the same skin.
Well, absolutely, but during that time, and there was a black community.
Oh.
There was a white community.
No matter where
there was a Jewish community. There was whatever it was, that was your community, and it was just kind of like, that's just how it is. However, what I was able to really recognize it was during busing. You remember Rachel B. Knoll and that whole dynamic where they were blowing up buses.
I remember they blew them up on 6th Avenue.
It was hostile, and so by the time I was like bussed into, I went into McMean and all of these different schools, and then ultimately George. But as a youngster, I remember this was elementary school. Smith Elementary School was right in the front door. I could walk out the front door of my house and walk into the front door of Smith Elementary School. They made it to where I walked out the front door of the house into a bus and went to a school called Slavens. This black kid at Slavens.
I'm getting it. It's inside.
But the dynamic is that's the first time I saw a different community. My world shifted, like, okay, this is what this looks like, this is what this looks like. And it wasn't better or worse, but it was different. And then when you went into classrooms where teachers were a part of this social experiment, which is you can legislate laws, but you can't legislate how I feel about anything. And so when I started getting in front of teachers that were like, I don't believe in you, I don't want you here, I don't even like this political climate. And this whole dynamic frustrates me. Now, as a child,
how old are you then?
I'm saying maybe 2nd, 3rd grade.
Wow.
So one thing that young people know, they might not know the vocabulary, but they know the feeling. Young people know if they're loved, if they're appreciated, if they're wanted. And that's why you've got a lot of what they call gang violence, because those are the dynamics that are not loved, not wanted, that are pushed aside, and then they coalesce with each other. And then there's this proverb, this African proverb that says, if you don't initiate the child into the village, they will burn it down to feel the warmth. And so I'm going into this educational system and it's venomous. It's like folks don't like each other. They don't know each other. I don't know what it's about. You know, it's this whole social dynamic, and then teachers are looking and like they don't know. And even to today, when you hear somebody who can conjugate a verb, it's like, oh, you speak well. Like, wait a minute. Like, there's these expectations. So I learned it early on, and it's a feeling. It's not the vocabulary. When you get older, you're able to put the vocabulary to the feeling.
People talk about getting radicalized. It's a term where, you know, in the 60s it was somewhat popular to not some, it was, people decided, rightfully so, the war was a lie, or what Nixon was doing in the 70s. Those kind, what's really kind of goes through the Trump stuff too, or Bush Cheney in Afghanistan, Bush Cheney in Iraq. I mean, people started to figure stuff out. Was there a moment when the light went on and you went?
Well, you got to remember, I was raised in the middle of that struggle. So I was the generation to where when the Black Panther Party and Lauren Watson, who you knew well, and they, like, people don't understand how much of the history you know, not only because you've studied it, but you were a part of it. You're like the Forrest Gump of this thing sometimes. You don't say it, but I know you show up in a lot of different places.
But we fought, and
you
so
know,
we got our hands up, and so we went to the Red Shield. And
all of that. So that was the community. All those individuals that you knew as older, those were the ones that were shaping the fabric of the community. The Rachel B. Knowles, the Lauren Watsons. I was eating those free lunch program meals that were.
I was with Lauren's nephew not too long ago.
And so those free lunch programs, and by the way, FF I think passed, where they're talking about feeding the kids, et cetera, like that. That comes out of the Black Panther Party.
You know it does.
So I was there in those programs. I remember seeing Muhammad Ali and the pride of if black folks win. And then of course you come under James Brown, Say It Loud, I'm black and I'm proud. All of that is what I'm shaped in. And they were coming out of, you know, if you're white, all right. If you're yellow, you're mellow. If you're brown, stick around. But if you're black, get back. So they started fighting that. And then you've got the Cleo Parker Robinson's dance theater. They were reclaiming their roots. And they were going around the world. You got Stevie Wonder singing about all of these different places and struggles. So I was shaped in all of that. And so it wasn't anything that I discovered. It was like, that's what it is. So my thinking is when folks don't think that there's black greatness, or when they think that subpar education is somehow acceptable and all those different things, or that adults shouldn't be in the lives of young people, or young people running the lives of old people. Right now you've got parents, their children are running their houses. And then you've got neighborhoods where the adults are afraid of the kids. Like, and that's in the suburbs and in the inner city. You got parents that are saying, I don't know if somebody's going to come shoot up the school. Me and you, we saw in my neighborhood, they were shooting up each other for like 25 years before, you know, that conversation took place. So my awakening was not so much of something I discovered, it was what I was formed in.
What do you see now? I mean, you know, the young man that we talked about, now, you know, we're both old guys. I'm really an old guy. But what do you see now?
I see silos. I see another missed opportunity where individuals don't get to know one another. I see a lot of fear. Like, one of the things I really see across this particular society, and I don't know if it's social engineering or not, but it's the infusion of a lot of fear. I'm afraid of you. I'm afraid to go here. I got a lock on everything. You know, when I was growing up, I could walk to school around the corner. On the weekend, I could drive my little bike all over the community and get there by dark. Today, I see children that can't even cross the street without their parents holding their hands, walking them right into the front door. I don't see a lot of the hatred at a younger level, but I do see the silos, the fear, you know what, if you get something, it's going to be at the expense of me. Politically, there's no dialogue. You know, I think there should be a right, a left, a center, et cetera. But there are those that are saying it should only be this, it should only be that. We'll never have a conversation. And then it just bottlenecks and nothing takes place in the middle.
Yeah, my brother and I, and maybe someday I could zoom him into this, he lives in Florida, and we, for whatever reason, have had these lengthy growing up stories, you telling stories. He had an interesting line. He said, we were feral, meaning like, you know, we were wild, and there were gangs, and but it was a steel mill town, and Polish kids, Irish kids, Sicilians, Italians, I didn't know any Jewish kids growing up, and I knew the black kids because they lived on the other side of the railroad tracks, and we played sports, and they hung out in the pool room and that kind of stuff. So I think there was, and some of it I said to my brother, some of it was just economic levels or income levels, and
That's a big point.
yeah, I think so.
When you start talking about
And then
class.
and to follow up, then you don't carry that Jones with you about. Believe me, I heard one ethnic slur I didn't listen to or hear or grow up or probably say, but I knew the guys, and the guys knew us, and it kind of like filtered away.
Well, when you start speaking of class and you start thinking about how folks think about one another. Okay, so I'm in one of those neighborhoods. We would say class, it's good school, all those safe, whatever, engagement and all of that. All of the children in the neighborhood are at my house. It looks like the United Nations. They all get along as little kids. I don't know how they'll get along as adults, but as kids, they are, playing like kids. They don't care about all those different things. But from a class perspective, and you say what's going on in this country, I watched the Super Bowl halftime show, and the Crips won that Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I don't know if folks knew what they were watching.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the soundtrack of the executives that grew up, like they were just like, 20, 30 years ago, they grew up listening to Snoop Dogg and all of the Crip walking. Oh, yeah. And I'm not disparaging it, but I am saying you're looking at folks that became billionaires based on a undercurrent of poverty, and now they have infused those values into your children, so much so that it is the mainstream soundtrack of the United States of America, promulgated around the world. I'm talking about gang banging, Crip walking, the dope, all of those different things, and I appreciate it as entertainment. But we know young people take their entertainment, it becomes a part of their identity. And so what's happening with this country, it becomes everyone's just trying to get another dollar. And it doesn't even matter what the values are attached to it, what I need to do to get there. And even if I'm there, I can be at the highest levels and just outright lie. You know what I mean? And folks will say, you know what, that's okay for you to do it, but I don't like anybody else to do it. So what's happening in this country is this level of hypocrisy that I think that at some point we're going to have to address and see if we really believe in the values that we say we do.
I have asked you a dozen times to run for office. I'm not making this up. I'm going to be his campaign manager, and he's going to run for mayor.
We're just going to shut it down.
I'm going to shut this. But you have so many different irons in the fire now. Did you ever think about it? Because I always thought, you had this, and you can watch it, this important voice that other politicos or other people operating in the city, I don't care where, get a hell of a lot more attention than you. The last time that you got attention was over a book that came out, and everybody got afraid.
Well, that's an interesting, and it's interesting. Even that book that you're talking about, The Holly by Julian Rubinstein, is where it's so interesting. The very dynamic where Julian talks about law enforcement, particularly in these dubious behaviors around community and et cetera. And when I point out all of the flaws in the book, I'm just talking about factual flaws, like, there is a difference between Shorter AME Church and New Hope Baptist Church. Like, there is. Little flaws like that. He gets afraid and says, I'm threatening his life, and goes to the very police to report me based on what he's writing about is somehow not right. You know what I mean? And so there's a lot of attention on that. Well, you live that a lot, because what happens is when you point out the elephant in the room, or you just speak truth or truth to power, it makes individuals nervous. But we just continue to say it and continue to do it. Maybe an anomaly, but there are people who are listening. They might not say they're listening, but they show up at those polls.
And there's a film coming now. I'm told. I haven't seen it.
It's out.
It is? Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it.
Okay. I actually saw Julian for the first time about a month ago. I hadn't seen him in a long time, and that was then Brother Jeff. The people were playing you up as the bad guy. I'm going, that's that. No. Then I thought to myself, you've always had that voice. That a lot of people. I mean, we both share a lot of enemies, but the point of it was when I never heard you or ever saw you do anything that wasn't true. I mean, you made a lot of people angry and PO'd a lot of people, but you didn't say anything ever in the whatever amount of years we've been friends that was a lie.
I just want to know what your values are.
Yeah,
like, that's it.
Yeah, you jerked a lot of people around, rightfully so, and then people got afraid of you. The mayor, you would think, oh, an African American man. You tell the truth about the mayor, and no one understands why you do that. I
saw Mayor Hancock last night, and we talked, and we always speak. And this is the thing that I wish that society would be able to do. I can value you in the sanctity of your humanness. You know what I mean? And totally disagree with your policies. And there's nothing to me that says I'm going to trash you as a person, but I am going to tell you that I don't like the fact, Mayor Hancock, that you grew up, as you say, in poverty. You had issues where you didn't have a relationship with your father. You were homeless. You know what I mean? And then when you get to the highest levels of power, you make it illegal for someone to be unhoused or homeless. I mean, your greatest solution is to sell the property that low-income housing and subsidized housing is to private developers. You know, the very issues that you grew up that were barriers in your life, when you get to the position to where you could help someone and also build a city, you kick your own people. Like, I'm going to tell you that. I'm going to ask you that. I'm going to remind you that. I'm going to say, you know what? During the height of the Me Too movement, you sexually assault or harass your detective.
Perhaps more than one.
You know, and all of these individuals say, you know, we don't like men mistreating women. However, hooray, we're going to elect you to a third term. I'm going to point that out. And maybe it's not the mayor, maybe it's our own hypocrisy. I saw powerful black women like the strategy. I saw Mayor Hancock's campaign turn a white woman, Jamie Gillis, candidate, into a rabid racist.
And she's not. I know her.
She's not.
Lovely woman.
But I mean, to do that.
Yeah. Oh, that was horrible.
As a strategy, because
I know who did it too.
Yeah, of course we do. And it's like, to allow those things to happen are reasons ordinary people say, you know what? I just want to know if my children are going to be safe. I don't want, like, you don't know the acronym NAACP and nobody else does. The largest organization in our community, the largest church, the largest NAACP chapter, the largest urban league is the Crips. And I can guarantee you that right now.
Remember when we talked, and I had read that book, and I called Jeff and we talked. And the book is about, it's about jazz. And it's about how music comes from Storyville and comes up. And this guy's a brilliant historian. And I had to call Jeffrey on it and to ask him about it. But he said Al Capone did more for African American entertainers and musicians than anybody else. So I called Jeffrey. You're already onto it, and that you're my I mean,
it's the N word.
And he said when the white guy puts his hand
on the shoulder,
on this black man's shoulder in a bar or in a club,
he says, "This is my N word. This is my N word."
You're protected.
And then when you go into the community, like you go into the community right now, you'll see a lot of young folks, black folks in general, saying, "This is my N word." Yeah. They don't know the origin of where that comes from.
It comes from the mob.
They don't know that, you know what, Louis Armstrong knew that when he was traveling, he needed to have someone that would make sure that he's safe, he's taken care of, nobody's going to bother him. And it was Al. And it was Al.
It was Al.
And other individuals in industries, you need to know if you're going to be taken care of. I can take you into some of the hardest hoods right now. And there could be a Maserati parked right there in the middle of what you call the hardest hood anywhere, and nobody will touch it. And why? Because they know whose car that is. Everybody knows who they can bother and what they could bother. And when you have the level of talent that a Louis Armstrong had, you're going to have a lot of individuals that are going to try and take advantage of you, threaten you, exploit you, except if they know who's behind you. And that's why these politicians, when they're running, you have to look beyond them and say, who are they really working for? Like, who really has their hand on their shoulder? And I can tell you, Denver, it is and I call it the mile high income city. It's 17th Street. It's the lawyers. It's the real estaters. It's the developers.
The bond daddies.
How in the world can you have a airport right now, and it's the Grand Hall, almost $1 billion overrun, and then you pay the firm to leave, and nobody's held accountable.
My girlfriend's watching this right now. We were in Cherry Creek yesterday, and they've changed the entire parking system to this. So you got to use your phone and all this kind of stuff, which I know nothing about. I'm looking at it. It used to be put a quarter in, and I said, somebody is on a take.
Yeah.
Somebody, somehow, they sold the city this system that is baffling to an old guy who knows nothing about, you know. I said, but it's a deal. It's a mark.
If you get a traffic, not a traffic ticket, if you get a parking ticket right now and you mailed it, you'd mail it to Texas.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, you mean to tell me there's no one in Denver that can open up an envelope and deposit your check into a local bank? The city has become a colony. It's a tourist attraction. It's a pass-through. No one wants to live there. They're like, I'm here for a moment while the money is good, and then I'm moving on. It's just it's ridiculous. And I think that a lot of individuals are saying, I can't afford to live here. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm safe. In the mile high income city, if it's not nailed down, it's getting stolen. They're taking cars. You know what I mean? You're seeing villages of just tents. You're seeing mental illness. All of these dynamics, while those in power are trying to tell you everything is all right. Everything's all right for them. It's not all right for everyone. And most individuals are one paycheck away from living on their parents' couch or their parents coming to live with them.
This has gone so fast. What do you want? I mean, what's next for you? You're like the Energizer Bunny. You never let down. So, what's in the wind?
Well, I've been looking at, a neighborhood like 5 Points is known, like Mount Rushmore is known because of what's there.
Sure.
People know 5 Points because of 5 points, 5 intersections that come together. They just changed it into 4 points. I'm turning the corner and I'm like, I can't turn it. Who made 5 points, 4 points? And even if it was a destination where folks want to learn a little bit about the culture of a neighborhood or just some character beyond, these box stores, etc., someone in their wisdom said, well, maybe this intersection should be blocked off. And they put up these white things everywhere, and everybody's trying to say, what are they?
Who asked me?
And what are they? Like, is it a bike lane? There's no bike lane. It's just what is going on? I think ordinary individuals just want to know what's going on, what's happening in their neighborhoods. Can they know their neighbor without just having their whole block occupied by Airbnbs?
Yeah.
Like, can we just have a neighborhood? I think that what's next is reminding these politicians and these leaders to just leave us alone. We don't trust you anymore. We second guess everything you do because you betrayed the trust. You violated the social contract. All of those different dynamics. And they think everything is okay. Everything's not okay.
I agree with you. I agree. And it's just going to take a spark.
It's going to take a spark.
So what's next? I mean, you've accomplished so much. What do you see next? I mean,
my joy really has been working with young people. It's easy to raise good, healthy, whole young people than fix adults. And so my thing is, I'm really fired up. I had a room full of freshmen from Manual High School yesterday, looking at young individuals that have a vision for the world that they want to live in. I want to help support them. Our world is passing by.
We're done.
They're building a world. And I'm like, how can we pass on some of this information, this wisdom, some of this critical thinking? Like, I want folks to be able to, I don't want to tell you what to think. I just want you to know how to think. And so my passion, again, is young people, young leaders, being available to share with those who would want to listen. And then those who don't, it's fine. You just keep, like the Republican Party, just keep getting whooped and during all these elections and across the nation. And so
we're both
young people.
Final things, we're both fight fans. And there's a line, you can either lose a fight or this other guy wins it. And what happened last night was the party beat itself. The fighter, and so because we're talking about Muhammad because of this thing I just finished reading about him. And Muhammad would beat people. He won fights. Other fighters just lost them.
Yeah. Well, that's what's happening. I think that what's happening with some systems, and I'm just going to say specifically in Colorado, the Republican Party and even the Democratic Party, the same individuals win financially regardless of if they win or lose.
That's right.
Like, can you imagine you are constantly compensated for losing?
It's like betting with a bookie.
Yeah, and
bookie's
so
going to make money.
Yeah, and so until you have individuals that say, I'm not going to continue going with you if you're going to continue losing, we need to do something different. We need to change players. We need to change philosophies. We need to course correct. If this society is not willing to course correct, then those who continually have, regardless of the outcome, are going to continue to have.
There's a candidate who lost last night who I like. And the first time I ever had lunch with him, he brings his campaign manager. And the name is really familiar. So I make a call afterward. I said, who is that guy? He said, he was Donald Trump's campaign manager for Colorado when Trump lost by 14 percentage points. I thought, and you hired him?
That's the thinking. Colorado went for Bernie Sanders.
Think about it.
So if you think that even if you get to the center,
Yeah.
you're not far enough to the left
Right.
to really attract what's happening in the populace. Now, Bernie can move those Bernie folks like there's
Bernie
enough.
bros.
The Bernie bros are enough. They've got enough to say, well, we won't vote. But you've got a lot more individuals that can move to the center. This state, they were thinking it was purple. Nate, this is blue until further notice. I don't look at the outcome of the House right now. They were projected to win 8 or whatever. I don't think they might have lost. They lost as many.
They got crushed.
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 They didn't know it. There was no strategist. There was no one that said this was probably not going to work.
Out of a party, like I said, and a guy that I liked wanted to change his name to Let's Go Brandon and get on the ballot. And I went and you're going to be involved in what again? And so it's almost like I'm relieved, and because finally last night I think the truth was at least seen. Now, if they actually see that how much of Donald Trump was behind all of the losses, and who was really behind the victories, individual men and women. I mean, it wasn't any big giant I love Joe Biden movement because Joe's on the ropes.
I think that here's the sports analogy. You go to the big fight.
Yeah.
You look at the 2 contestants walk to the middle of the ring, and you just look at their physical shape.
She was wet.
Like, here's somebody that's overweight, is breathing, just made it out the tunnel.
Yeah.
He gets in, and everybody says, but I want him to win.
Yeah.
I don't care what you want.
You lost. We used to watch it because, I used to pug a little bit. And I learned from the guys they said, when a guy takes his ring jacket off, bet the wet fighter.
There it is.
Because he's been back there, and the other guys didn't have it. This guy's been back there slugging with hands and everything for 20 minutes for coming in the ring. He takes that ring coat off, he's wet.
Well,
he said, bet the wet fighter.
Bet the wet fighter. I would just close by saying, if the party leaders or the strategists, etc., are surprised by the outcome, that's the larger problem.
The only people that were surprised this morning were talk show hosts.
If you knew your candidate was going up against whatever, because you got to look at the tape, and if you thought that your candidate, if you are truly surprised today that your candidate, now I'm not talking about close races, I'm talking about blowouts. If you're surprised, you're the problem.
And it's called taking a fight. I mean, 2 fighters, you have to take the fight. And the best example is in the movie Rocky, when he's hitting that side of beef, and Withers is paying attention to TV, and the guy said, look at this, and he's over there making business deals. They don't realize that Rocky's killing this side of beef. And no, I'm serious. I mean, it was a real interesting moment for me because they're going, Carl Withers, who I love, they're going, no, he's blowing him off because he's cutting fat deal, and this guy's hitting sides of beef.
Wow.
And that's what happened.
You got to want it. You got to be prepared. Politics is a science. It's not I just want to. I just think I can. I've got a good conversation. At some point, you got 64 counties.
It's a fight.
64 counties. You got to go get it. Operate at the local level. You know what I mean? And work out. And if you talk to folks at the local level, they are really concerned about basic dynamics, and they don't care about the name calling, the cat fighting, the back and forth. Because if you're acting like children, adults are not going to vote for children to represent them.
This was the quickest. We've never done an entire hour. I mean, the shoot has been just a wonderful success because of this man over here, Mark Crowley. This turned out to be what I hoped. And when I say the one and only, and I've told so many people my respect and my love for this man, Brother Jeff, do me a favor, or please, 6 months from now, maybe beginning of summer, come back and do it again.
Yeah, we've got to do a lot. We
got so many things we want to do.
Now the mayoral races are taking place. I saw all of the candidates last night.
Man.
I've been watching it, and it's going to be a great time.
It's like jackals circling. No.
I'm watching them counsel each other out right now. I'm like, everybody's waiting for the runoff.
Shanking guys.
All 6 of y'all are saying the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
You can't figure out, pick the best one amongst the 6 and run it.
I looked at the names of the ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. It's like being in the joint, somebody's got a knife. Brother Jeff, Saturday morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, we'll do the radio show on 710 KNUS, and this is a one-of-a-kind guy, for real. Take care of yourself. Thank you, Mark Crowley, and thank you to Brian, and of course to Kelly Michaels. Thanks, you guys. See ya.